The recording chamber hummed with tension as Vextar, the veteran Kethany warrior, settled his scarred frame into the interview chair. His 4 eyes, once bright amber, now held the dull sheen of someone who had seen too much. Across from him sat interviewer Kilmoth, a neutral species journalist from the Galactic News Consortium. The chamber itself was a marvel of neutral technology. It's designed to accommodate dozens of different alien species. Environmental controls adjusted automatically to each occupant's needs, while universal translators ensured perfect communication despite the vast biological differences between the two beings. Vextar's massive form dominated the specially reinforced chair. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his chitinous exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles. Deep gouges ran along his left arm, where human projectiles had found their mark decades ago. His secondary arms, smaller but no less deadly, rested uneasily on the chair's armrests. Each digit ended in razor-sharp claws that had once been instruments of war. "State your name and rank for the record," Kilmoth began, his tentacles poised over the recording device. The journalist's own species, the Veltari, were known throughout the galaxy for their neutrality and dedication to truth. His translucent skin shifted colors subtly, indicating his emotional state to those who knew how to read the signs. Vextar Colthan, former battle captain of the 47th Kethany Assault Legion. His voice carried the weight of years, each word carefully measured. The universal translator struggled momentarily with the guttural tones of the Kethani language before settling into a steady rhythm. "I served during what your people call the Terran Kethany War." Kilmoth's tentacles flickered across the recording interface, bringing up holographic displays that showed star charts and battle records. "According to our files, you commanded over 2,000 warriors during the conflict. You were decorated 17 times for valor, promoted twice during active combat, and personally led the assault on 3 human colonies." All true. Vextar's mandibles clicked once, a brief acknowledgement. "Yet after the war's end, you resigned. Your commission, refused all Imperial honors, and retreated to the Outer Rim territories. You've remained silent for 30 cycles. Why speak now?" The question hung in the air like a charged particle beam. Vextar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture that among his people indicated deep contemplation. His scarred carapace shifted as he leaned forward, the metal chair creaking under his massive weight. "Because the galaxy needs to know the truth about humans, about what we faced out there." Voice dropped to a rumble that seemed to vibrate through the chamber's walls. "Because I've watched from the shadows as younger races make the same assumptions we did. They see human settlements and think easy targets. They calculate human military strength and believe they have found weakness." Kilmoth's skin shifted to a pale blue, indicating intense focus. "You believe they are making a mistake? You believe they are walking toward their own extinction?" Vextar's claws unconsciously gouged parallel lines in the armrest, "and I cannot carry that knowledge to my grave." The interview chamber's lights dimmed automatically as the recording system switched to enhanced audio mode. Through the transparent aluminum windows, the stars of the neutral zone glittered like scattered diamonds against the cosmic void. "Tell me about the beginning," Kilmoth prompted gently. "How did the Kethany Empire view humans before the war?" Vextar's scarred features twisted into what might have been a smile on a human face, but on his alien visage appeared more like a grimace of pain. "We thought we knew war. The Kethany Empire had conquered 47 systems over the course of 2 centuries. Our battle doctrine was refined through constant conflict. Our technology superior to every species we had encountered. Our warriors were bred for combat, trained from hatching to be perfect instruments of conquest." He paused, one of his secondary arms reaching up to trace a particularly deep scar that ran from his left eye down to his mandible. "When we received orders to subjugate the human colonies on the Outer Rim, Command called it a routine pacification mission. Some of the younger officers actually complained about the assignment, thinking it would be too easy to provide proper combat experience." The holographic displays flickered to life, showing images of human colonies as they appeared in Kethani intelligence reports. Simple structures, basic infrastructure, no visible signs of advanced military technology. the intelligence. Reports were laughable, Vexstar continued, his voice taking on a bitter edge. Humans used crude kinetic weapons that fired solid metal projectiles. They had no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no antimatter warheads. Their spacecraft were slow, bulky affairs that burned chemical fuel like ancient museum pieces. Were described as emotional primitives with a tendency toward internal conflict and tribal warfare. Easy prey. His scarred carapace reflected the artificial light as he shifted in his chair. The Xenopsychology department had prepared detailed profiles. Humans were classified as a juvenile species, technologically backward, politically divided, lacking the discipline for coordinated resistance. The entire campaign was expected to last no more than 6 standard months, but that wasn't the case, Kilmoth asked. Though his shifting skin color suggested he already knew the answer, Vexter's 4 eyes fixed on the journalist with an intensity that made the chamber's temperature controls adjust automatically. When he spoke, his voice dropped, to barely above a whisper, but every word carried the weight of absolute certainty. No, that wasn't the case at all. The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the vast emptiness of space itself, filled with the promise of revelations that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. Our first engagement was on Kepler 186f, a mining colony with maybe 50,000 humans, Vexstar continued, his eyes growing distant. The holographic display shifted to show the planet as it appeared in Kethany battle records, a dusty world with scattered settlements connected by mining tunnels that ran deep into the rocky surface. The planet looked peaceful from orbit. Simple structures, basic power grids, nothing that suggested military preparation. Our fleet consisted of 12 battlecruisers and 4 troop carriers, enough firepower to level a major city. For a small mining colony, it seemed like using a plasma cannon to kill an insect. Vexstar's secondary arms gestured at the display, highlighting the tactical formations. We deployed standard siege protocols, orbital bombardment of military installations, followed by ground assault to secure the population centers. The operation was supposed to be completed in 18 hours. Command had already scheduled the victory celebration. The veteran warrior's claws unconsciously gouged the armrest of his chair as the memory surfaced. The bombardment went as expected. We destroyed their planetary defense grid in under an hour. 3 orbital platforms, 2 ground-based missile sites, and what appeared to be their communications array. Our sensors showed complete electromagnetic silence from the surface. Total communication blackout. He paused, his breathing becoming slightly labored. But something felt wrong during the descent. Our dropships encountered no resistance, no surface-to-air missiles, no fighter craft, nothing. For a colony that size, the lack of response was ... unusual. Even the weakest species typically attempted some kind of defensive action. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he recalled those first moments on the planet's surface. Landed in formation, 3 companies in the primary zone, 2 more flanking the civilian areas. The ground was still smoking from our bombardment, but the infrastructure damage was minimal. Very precise strikes, just like the manual recommended. The first sign something was wrong came when we found their military compound. It was empty, not evacuated, empty. But there were bodies scattered around, human bodies in military uniforms, maybe 30 or 40 of them. They were positioned near defensive barriers, weapons scattered nearby as if they had been caught off guard by our bombardment. Kilmoth's tentacles shifted color to indicate curiosity. They had abandoned their posts. We thought so. My unit was ordered to secure the compound while the main force moved toward the civilian centers. Standard protocol, sweep for intelligence, secure any surviving equipment, establish a forward command post. Simple, routine operation. Vexstar's mandibles clicked once, then again, faster. That's when they struck. I was examining what appeared to be their command console when Warrior Kethmal stepped over one of the human bodies near the entrance. The body moved. The chamber's environmental controls adjusted automatically as Vexstar's body temperature spiked with the memory. The dead humans weren't dead. They had coated themselves in some kind of biogel that masked their heat signatures, slowed their breathing to almost nothing. Our thermal scanners read them as corpses cooling to ambient temperature. When we stepped over them, when we turned our backs, he shuddered, a motion that sent ripples through his chitinous exoskeleton. They erupted like volcanic vents. Plasma, grenades hidden beneath their bodies, chemical explosives wrapped around their torsos. Some kind of acidic compound that ate through our armor like it was made of paper. The human I had dismissed as dead grabbed my ankle with both hands and smiled at me before detonating something that melted the entire left side of my leg. The journalist leaned forward, his skin shifting to a pale green that indicated fascination. Mixed with horror? An ambush? More than that. It was psychological warfare of a kind we had never encountered. They used their own apparent corpses as weapons. In Kethany culture, the dead are sacred. We honor fallen warriors, even those of our enemies. The idea of desecrating them for tactical advantage was... Vexstar searched for words in the Universal Translator's database. It was obscene, incomprehensible. It violated every principle of honorable combat we had ever known. His scarred features twisted as he continued. But that was just the beginning. As we regrouped, as my surviving warriors tried to treat their wounds and call for medical support, they hit us with something else. Propaganda broadcasts on all frequencies, not threats or demands for surrender. Worse. The holographic display flickered to show communication logs from that day. They were playing recordings of our own families back on Kethros Prime, talking about how proud they were of us, how they couldn't wait for us to come home. Personal messages that should have been impossible for them to intercept communications. From our wives, our offspring, our clutch brothers. The interviewer's tentacles writhed in confusion, their color shifting to deep purple. Why would they do that? To remind us what we had to lose. To make us think of home while they were killing us. Every time one of my soldiers heard his offspring's voice over the com saying, "Come home safe, father," his focus shattered. His weapon would lower for just a moment. His attention would drift to thoughts of family, and that's when the humans would strike from their hiding places in the rubble. Vexstar's mandibles clicked rapidly now, a sign of extreme agitation among his species. They had studied us. Somehow they had learned our psychology, our cultural weaknesses, our emotional triggers. While we were preparing for a simple military conquest, they were preparing to wage war against our minds. The veteran warrior stood suddenly, his massive frame casting shadows across the recording equipment. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like demons from our oldest nightmares. I watched a human female, couldn't have weighed more than 60 kilos, barely came up to my chest armor, charge a full squad of my warriors. She was already bleeding from 3 plasma. Burns, her left arm was clearly broken, but she kept coming. His claws extended involuntarily as he relived the moment. When her weapon ran out of ammunition, she used it as a club. When that broke, she used her bare hands. She grabbed Warrior Velthok's helmet and somehow found the weak point in his neck armor. 60 kilos of injured human female killed a 300-kilo Kethany warrior with her fingernails. Single combat is not unusual in warfare, Killmoth observed, though his skin had shifted to a worried yellow. This wasn't single combat. This was fury incarnate. She killed 2 of my soldiers with improvised weapons before we brought her down. And as she died, as her lifeblood pooled on the ground beneath our feet, she was laughing. Laughing and calling us cowards in her own language. The translator couldn't process some of the words, but the tone was unmistakable. She was mocking us even as she died. The recording chamber fell silent for several moments as Vexstar slowly returned to his chair. The weight of the memory seemed to press down on his massive frame like a gravitational field. That night, we lost 40% of our landing force. Not to superior technology or tactics, but to sheer, incomprehensible human rage. They had turned their own deaths into weapons, their own pain into motivation, their own fear into something. That terrified us more than any plasma cannon ever could. After Kepler 186F, Command decided we needed a different approach. Vexstar resumed after a brief recess. The holographic display now showed a much larger world, surface covered in vast forests and mountain ranges that stretched across 3 continents. They sent 3 full battle fleets to Kepler-4 for to be a major human colony world with over 2 million inhabitants. Surely, they reasoned, the humans would surrender when faced with overwhelming force. The display zoomed in to show the massive Cathani fleet as it had appeared in orbit around the planet. 67 warships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single bombardment. The combined firepower could have cracked the planet's crust if focused properly. Admiral Kolvash himself took command of the operation. He was a veteran of 23 successful campaigns, a warrior who had never known defeat. His message to the human colonies was broadcast on every frequency, translated into their primitive languages. Vexstar's scarred features twisted into what might have been a smile on a human face. Surrender unconditionally within 72 hours, or face complete orbital bombardment. The alien warrior's mandibles clicked in what could have been amusement. The human's response was broadcast across the entire system within 6 hours. 3 words that would haunt our dreams for decades. Come and take it. Killmouth's tentacles shifted to a questioning blue. They refused to surrender despite being outnumbered 30-1. They did more than refuse. They turned their response into a rallying cry. Every human settlement on the planet began broadcasting the same message, over and over in dozens of different languages. Come and take it. Come and take it. It became like a drumbeat, a constant reminder that they would not yield. Vexstar's claws traced the deep scars on his carapace as he continued. The siege lasted 8 months. 8 months of the most brutal, grinding warfare the galaxy has ever seen. But this wasn't conventional warfare. The humans turned that entire planet into a weapon against us. The veteran warrior gestured at the display, which now showed the planet's surface in terrifying detail. Kepler-4b wasn't just a colony world. It was a living ecosystem that the humans had spent generations learning to understand. And somehow, impossibly, they convinced that ecosystem to fight alongside them. Killmoth adjusted his recording equipment, his skin now a deep green that indicated intense fascination. How so? Kepler-4b had an ecosystem of native predators, pack hunters called stalkers, creatures the size of your average shuttlecraft with intelligence to match. They were apex predators, the kind of beasts that should have been humanity's greatest threat on that world. But the humans didn't fight them, they domesticated them. Somehow, they turned these killing machines into allies. The display showed grainy footage from Cathani, combat recordings, massive wolf-like creatures with crystalline fur that reflected light like armor plating. Each one stood nearly 4 meters tall, with jaws that could crush Cathani's battle armor and claws that could tear through reinforced hull plating. My unit was conducting a sweep of the northern continent when we encountered our first human stalker pack. We were moving through what appeared to be empty forest when the trees themselves seemed to come alive. Humans emerged from camouflage positions, but they weren't alone. They rode the stalkers like cavalry mounts, but it was worse than that. They had formed some kind of bond. Vexstar's voice grew hollow as he relived the memory. The beasts moved in perfect synchronization with their human partners. When a human pointed, the stalker would understand. When a stalker sensed danger, the human would react instantly. It was like watching a single organism with multiple bodies. His secondary arms gestured frantically as he described the encounter. We opened fire on what we thought was a small group of humans. The stalkers didn't just defend their riders, they threw themselves between our plasma beams and the humans. These apex predators, these perfect killing machines, were willing to die to protect beings that should have been their prey. And the humans? Killmoth prompted. The humans were even worse. When their stalkers fell, they didn't retreat or mourn. They threw themselves into suicidal charges to avenge their fallen partners. I watched a human female leap from her dying stalker's back and single-handedly attack a full squad of my warriors. She had no weapons except her bare hands and a fury that seemed to burn like a star. The display shifted to show weather patterns around Kepler-4b. Massive storm systems swirled across the planet's surface, each one capable of generating electromagnetic pulses that could disable unshielded technology. But the real horror came during the storm season. Kepler-4 to be experiences electromagnetic storms that can fry unshielded electronics from orbit. Ships had to maintain distance. Our ground forces had to shelter our equipment and limit our operations. We thought this would give us an advantage. Surely the primitive humans would be even more limited. Vexstar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep agitation.
We were wrong.
The humans had learned to use the storms as cover. They had somehow adapted their technology to function during the electromagnetic chaos, and our sensors were useless. And our communications were down. They moved like ghosts through the storm. His voice dropped too barely above a whisper. I remember one night lightning was striking every few seconds, and the electromagnetic interference was so severe that our armor's life support systems were failing. Through the static on our comms, we heard something that made our exoskeletons tremble. Singing, human voices harmonizing despite the chaos around them. The veteran warrior stood and moved to the chamber's viewport, staring out at the stars. The singing grew louder as the storm intensified. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like listening to angels preparing for war. Then the attacks began. They came from everywhere at once. From the ground, bursting out of hidden tunnels that we hadn't detected. From the trees where they had been waiting motionless for hours. Even from above, as they had somehow learned to glide using the storm winds and crude wingsuits made from local materials. Vexstar's reflection in the viewport showed the deep trauma still etched in his alien features. And all the while, that eerie singing continued. It wasn't random. It was coordinated. They were using their voices to communicate, to coordinate attacks, to maintain morale in conditions that should have broken any organized resistance. By morning, when the storm had passed and our systems came back online, we had lost an entire company. 200 of our finest warriors gone. But they hadn't just been killed, they had been arranged in perfect formations, as if the humans were making some kind of artistic statement with our dead. The alien warrior returned to his chair, his massive frame seeming somehow diminished. But the worst part, the thing that still haunts my dreams, was discovering that some of my soldiers had joined the singing before they died. In their final moments, isolated and terrified, they had begun to harmonize with the human voices around them. Killmoth's tentacles writhed in confusion. Why would they do that? The humans had a way of getting into your head, making you understand. In those final moments that you were just another invader on their world. That this planet had chosen its defenders and you were not among them. Some of my warriors, facing certain death in the storm, found themselves agreeing with their killers. Vexstar's scarred carapace reflected the chamber's lights as he continued. Command kept sending reinforcements, but morale was collapsing faster than we could replace losses. We had expected to fight soldiers, train military personnel with standard equipment and predictable tactics. Instead, we found ourselves fighting an entire ecosystem that had somehow aligned itself against us. Every rock could hide a human sniper. Every animal might be their ally. Every storm brought fresh hell from above, below, and all around us. The planet itself seemed to be fighting us, and the humans were just its most dangerous expression. Veteran's claws drummed nervously against his chair as he concluded. By the 6th month, some of my warriors were refusing to leave the fortified zones. They had seen too much, lost too many comrades to an enemy that seemed to exist everywhere and nowhere at once. The humans had turned Kepler-4 to be into a living nightmare that consumed Kethany's souls as efficiently as it consumed our bodies. The breaking point came during what Command designated Operation Final Sweep. Vexstar continued, his voice now barely audible. The holographic display shifted to show a detailed topographical map of Kepler-4 to be southern continent, focusing on a deep valley surrounded by towering mountain peaks. After 7 months of grinding warfare, we had finally managed to corner a significant portion of the human resistance. Approximately 10,000 human military personnel, and twice that. Many civilians had retreated into the Yashin Valley. It was a natural fortress, steep walls rising nearly 2 kilometers on all sides. Limited access points, underground cave systems that our sensors couldn't fully penetrate. Perfect for a siege. The veteran warrior's scarred carapace glistened under the chamber's lights as he leaned forward, Admiral Kolvash saw this as our final opportunity to end the campaign with some measure of victory. If we could capture or eliminate the leadership of the human resistance, the remaining scattered groups might finally surrender. The display zoomed in to show the valley in stunning detail. Makeshift human settlements dotted the valley floor, connected by a network of defensive positions that had been carved into the rock walls themselves. Supply lines ran through hidden tunnels, and observation posts crowned every strategic peak. We surrounded the valley with everything we had left. 12,000 Kethany warriors, supported by orbital bombardment platforms and atmospheric fighters. It should have been overwhelming force against a trapped enemy. But by then, we had learned to fear human desperation more than human strength. Vexstar's 4 eyes closed in what appeared to be pain. We offered terms. Full surrender in exchange for guaranteed safe passage for all civilians to neutral worlds. The military personnel would be processed as prisoners of war according to galactic conventions. Continue fighting, and we would glass the entire valley from orbit, leaving nothing but molten rock. His mandibles clicked once, slowly. We gave them 72 hours to decide. Standard protocol for siege situations, enough time to consider. The offer to weigh their options, to choose survival over pointless resistance. The alien warrior's claws extended involuntarily as he relived the memory. During those 3 days, our long-range sensors detected unusual activity in the valley. Construction work, movement of heavy equipment, what appeared to be mining operations. In the deepest caves, our intelligence officers assumed they were building better defensive positions, perhaps trying to dig an escape tunnel through the mountain. Kilmoth's tentacles shifted to a concerned purple. They were preparing something else. Their response came after exactly 71 hours and 59 minutes. It's not a message over the comm channels, not a white flag or a delegation of negotiators. Their response was a flash of light that could be seen from orbit. Vexstar's voice cracked as he continued. They detonated a nuclear device, not aimed at us, not directed toward our positions around the valley rim. They aimed it at themselves. The entire valley became a crater in an instant. 25,000 humans died. In a single flash, rather than surrender to us, the recording equipment hummed in the silence that followed. While the holographic display showed the aftermath, a perfectly circular crater where the valley had once been. The rock walls melted into glass, nothing remaining of the human settlement, except radioactive ash, was stationed on the northern ridge when it happened. The flash was so bright it overloaded our visual sensors, and the shockwave knocked several of our atmospheric fighters out of the sky. When the radiation cleared, enough for us to approach, we found nothing. Not bodies, not equipment, not even debris. Just a hole in the ground where 30,000 lives had chosen to end rather than submit. The veteran warrior stood and began pacing the small chamber, his massive frame barely contained by the space. But that wasn't the end of it. Within hours, our communication arrays began picking up similar energy signatures from across the planet. Every remaining human stronghold was generating the same electromagnetic patterns we had detected in Yashin Valley. His voice grew hollow with the memory. Across the planet, every remaining human stronghold did the same thing. They had been coordinating, preparing. While we thought they were fighting for survival, they were actually preparing for mutual extinction. In the span of 6 hours, the humans of Kepler-4 for to be committed species suicide on a planetary scale rather than accept defeat. The display now showed a global view of Kepler-4 for to be, with dozens of new craters marking the locations where human settlements had once existed. Each crater was perfectly circular, evidence of precisely placed nuclear devices designed for maximum destruction. Vexstar's mandibles clicked frantically as he struggled to convey the psychological impact. Do you understand what that means? They chose extinction over surrender. Not just the soldiers, not just the military leadership, the civilians, the children, the elderly, the sick, everyone. They made a collective decision that death was preferable to occupation. How is such coordination possible? Kilmoth asked, his skin now a deep blue that indicated profound confusion. We learned later that they had been preparing for this possibility since the siege began. Hidden communication networks, pre-positioned nuclear devices, detailed evacuation protocols that were actually preparation for mass suicide. Every human settlement on the planet had been given the same instructions if capture became inevitable. Choose death. The alien warrior returned to his chair, but remained on the edge, as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. The psychological impact on our forces was immediate and total. How do you fight an enemy that considers mutual destruction a victory? How do you conquer a people who would rather cease to exist than submit to your rule? His scarred features twisted with anguish. I watched hardened veterans, warriors who had conquered dozens of worlds, break down completely. Warrior the Kemla, who had served in 43 campaigns, began talking to empty air, convinced that the dead humans were still fighting him. Others refused to eat, refused to sleep, refused to follow orders. Vexstar's claws gouged new marks in the chair's armrest. Some requested immediate transfer off-world, claiming they could hear human voices calling to them from the craters. Others simply walked away from their posts, abandoning their weapons and armor. Wandering off into the poisoned landscape like sleepwalkers, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. A few took their own lives rather than continue the campaign. Kethany warriors, bred for battle and trained never to surrender, chose death over the possibility of facing another human settlement that would choose extinction over defeat. Command tried to suppress the news, but word spread throughout the fleet faster than plasma fire. We weren't fighting a war anymore. We were participating in a massacre, and somehow, impossibly, we were losing. Every victory we achieved was actually a defeat, because victory meant watching an entire population choose death rather than submit to us. The holographic display now showed intelligence reports from across human space, colony after colony, settlement after settlement, all broadcasting the same message on repeat: we will not surrender. We will not submit. If you want our worlds, you can have the radioactive ashes. Within a week of the Yashin Valley incident, we received new intelligence reports from other human colonies throughout their territory. They were all preparing the same response. Every human world we approached sent the same message, translated into dozens of languages, but always carrying the same meaning. Vexstar looked directly at his interviewer, his 4 eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that seemed to age him in real time. That's when I understood. We weren't fighting humans. We were fighting the concept of freedom itself, given physical form and armed with nuclear weapons. And that concept was willing to destroy everything, including itself, rather than allow us to claim victory. The war ended not with a treaty, but with a withdrawal. Vexstar began the final portion of his account. The holographic display now showed the massive Kethany fleet as it had appeared during those final days, ships damaged, formations broken, the proud armada that had arrived 8 months earlier now looking like survivors fleeing a disaster. Command made the decision quietly, without fanfare. No formal announcement, no diplomatic negotiations, no conditions for ceasefire. Admiral Kolvash simply transmitted new orders to all fleet commanders: disengage immediately. Return to home. Territories. Operation terminated. The veteran warrior's mandibles clicked slowly as he recalled those final moments. I was in the medical bay, recovering from radiation exposure suffered during one of the final crater reconnaissance missions when the orders came through. Warriors who had been preparing for another assault suddenly found themselves packing equipment for immediate departure. The official records state that the Terran colonies were deemed economically unviable for integration. Vexstar continued, his scarred features showing what might have been bitter amusement. The truth is, we were terrified. Absolutely, completely terrified of what we had encountered. Killmouth leaned forward, his tentacles shifting to a deep purple that indicated intense curiosity. Terrified of a species that had just demonstrated its willingness to self-destruct. Terrified of a species that had turned self-destruction into a weapon of mass deterrence. Vexstar corrected, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. After Kepler 442b, every intelligence agency in the galaxy began studying human psychology. Emergency xenopsychology committees were formed. Ancient archives were searched for similar behavioral patterns. and computational models ran continuously trying to understand what we had faced. The alien's scarred carapace seemed to darken as he continued. What we found changed everything we thought we knew about warfare, about conquest, about the very nature of intelligent species. The research teams discovered that humans don't fight wars the way other species do. They fight extinction events. The display shifted to show comparative analysis charts, behavioral patterns mapped across dozens of species. Human data points consistently fell outside normal parameters, creating statistical anomalies that defied conventional military theory. Every conflict in human history, from their smallest tribal disputes to planetary civil wars, is approached with the same fundamental assumption. Losing means the complete annihilation of everything they hold dear. Not just defeat, not just occupation or subjugation, total extinction of their way of life, their culture, their very identity. Vextar's claws traced patterns on the chair's armrest as he explained. This creates a paradox that breaks conventional military theory. Most species become more cautious as their situation becomes desperate. They seek negotiation, compromise, ways to preserve what they can. Humans do the opposite. His four eyes fixed on the journalist with an intensity that made the chamber's environmental controls adjust automatically. The closer humans come to defeat, the more dangerous they become. Push them hard enough, and they transform from defensive fighters into something approaching. He paused, searching the Universal Translator's database. Apocalyptic forces. They stop fighting to win and start fighting to ensure that victory becomes meaningless for their enemies. The veteran warrior stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the recording chamber. I've spent 30 cycles studying warfare across 47 different species since the war ended. The Cathani military archives, the Veltari, neutral databases, even classified research from species that prefer to remain anonymous. Every single intelligent species we've encountered has a breaking point. He moved to the chamber's viewport, gazing out at the stars that had once been battlefields. That moment where self-preservation overcomes duty, where surrender becomes preferable to death, where the instinct for survival trumps all other considerations. It's a fundamental characteristic of intelligent life, the ability to recognize when continued resistance becomes counterproductive. Vextar's reflection in the transparent aluminum showed the deep lines the trauma had carved into his alien features. Humans don't have that point. They don't possess that survival mechanism. That tells them when to stop fighting. Instead, they have what I call the escalation threshold. Push them past it, and they don't break like other species. They break everything else, including themselves if necessary. They turn their own destruction into a weapon that makes victory impossible for their enemies. The recording chamber hummed quietly as Vextar returned to his chair, but remained standing behind it, his claws gripping the backrest. The Cathani Empire has quietly circulated warnings to every major power in the galaxy. The message is classified at the highest levels, but the essence is simple. Do not engage humans in warfare unless you are prepared for them to turn their entire civilization into a weapon. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. It goes deeper than that. Our intelligence services have discovered that humans have been preparing for galactic-scale warfare since before they achieved faster-than-light travel. Their colonies aren't just settlements, they're weapons platforms designed to make conquest impossible. The holographic display shifted to show human colony layouts, revealing the hidden infrastructure that Cathani analysts had discovered. Nuclear devices integrated into power systems. Asteroid mining operations that could be converted to kinetic bombardment platforms. Seemingly peaceful research stations that contained the components for planet-killing weapons. Every human world is a potential Kepler 4-4 to be, Vextar continued. They've learned from their own history, from the wars that nearly destroyed their homeworld centuries ago. They've decided that if they must die, they will take their enemies with them, and they've built their entire interstellar civilization around that principle. Kilmoth's tentacles writhed in apparent distress. But why speak publicly now? Why break your silence after all these years? Vextar turned back to the interviewer, his 4 eyes reflecting a depth of understanding earned through terrible experience, because there are younger species, aggressive ones, who didn't learn our lesson. The Zephyrian Collective, the Andorian Trade Federation, even some of the newer species emerging from the Galactic Rim, they look at human colonies and see opportunity. His mandibles clicked rapidly with agitation. They see a species without energy shields or plasma cannons. They think easy conquest. They calculate human military strength using conventional parameters and believe they have found weakness. They're making the same mistake we made. The veteran warrior's voice carried the urgency of someone trying to prevent a catastrophe. I'm speaking now to deliver a warning that might prevent another. Tragedy like Kepler 4 for 2b, not just for the potential aggressors, but for the humans themselves. His scarred carapace reflected the chamber's lights as he continued. You see, we learned something else during our intelligence studies. Humans have a concept they call mutually assured destruction. It's not just a military doctrine for them. It's a cultural imperative woven into their very identity as a species. Vextar's claws extended involuntarily as he spoke. They would rather drag the entire galaxy into extinction than allow their freedom to be extinguished. And after what I witnessed, after what they're capable of, when pushed to their limits, he paused, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I believe they could do it. The recording chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems as Vextar slowly returned to his chair. The weight of his revelations seemed to press down on both occupants like a gravitational field. The humans won our war not through superior technology or tactics, but by making the cost of victory unacceptable. They transformed the very concept of defeat into a weapon of mass deterrence. They taught us that some victories are worse than any defeat. His 4 eyes closed briefly before fixing on the recording device. That is why I break my silence after 3 decades. Not as a veteran sharing war stories, but as a survivor delivering a warning to the galaxy. Humanity's greatest strength isn't their willingness to die for freedom. It's their willingness to kill everything, including themselves, to preserve it. Vextar stood one final time, his massive frame filling the chamber as he delivered his final words. The galaxy would be wise to remember that, because the next species that tests human resolve might not be fortunate enough to withdraw and live to tell the tale. The recording device powered down with a soft chime, but the silence that followed seemed to echo with the weight of prophecy. The end.